Our disability is our greatest strength. It gives us the supervision to see the issues facing humanity from a more inclusive perspective and the grit to fight back against all odds. Welcome to Super Adaptables, the More Than Walking video podcast discussion. Welcome to Super Adaptables, the podcast where people of all abilities gather to discuss pressing issues that affect the disability community and the implications for the world at large. We are your hosts. I am Corey Pheez, C4 complete quadriplegic since 2005.
And I'm Jonathan Sigworth, C7 complete quadriplegic since 2006, both of us hailing from the great state of Connecticut.
We are recording this on Thursday, the 1st of May. It's unbelievable that it's May. It really is. 2025, and in a little bit, we'll be discussing due process, fair treatment under the law for all.
And just as a reminder, Super Adaptables is made possible in part by a grant from the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation's National Paralysis Resource Center. The information provided and opinions expressed in these podcasts do not necessarily reflect the views of the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. For more information about the Foundation's National Paralysis Resource Center, which is awesome, visit www.christopherreeve.org. Also, I should note that the views expressed on this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of More Than Walking, but belong to us as individual speakers.
Indeed. And, before we kick off, this episode, I find it so interesting when you can trace back different idioms and proverbs and just overall various sayings that people use, but you don't really necessarily know where they come from. So, in preparing for this, I learned about William Gladstone, who served as the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom for 4 non-consecutive terms, which is the most of any Prime Minister in Britain. He once said during a debate in the House of Commons on March 16, 1868, "Justice delayed is justice denied." Now, scholars differ over the origins of this legal maxim, but the meaning resonates with many people because they just want a judicial system that allows them to resolve their issues with the offending party quickly and ultimately fairly.
And that word fairly can be subjective depending on what side of the court you're on and the type of crime that's involved. Whether you're the defendant or the plaintiff, no one walks away happy if a ruling isn't in their favor. The judicial system is tricky to navigate. To understand all the legal jargon and complexities, you need to hire a lawyer, which comes with attorney's fees, endless paperwork, and time dedicated to fighting your case. These items we've listed are the bare minimum necessary to have, but many can't afford them, and often people find themselves becoming the victim in a system that's supposed to be objective, honest, and just.
Yeah. So, as we were talking off camera for a while now about due process, right? So due process is defined as fair treatment through the normal judicial system. Here in the United States, our justice system is comprised of a Supreme Court, the Attorney General, federal judges, and U.S. attorneys, in addition to federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies that work in tandem with one another at times to keep the peace and maintain lawful order throughout the nation. However, with any system put in place, there are bound to be issues where people slip through the cracks and innocent people become the victims. So, according to a University of Oregon course on when justice fails, wrongful convictions in the U.S. criminal justice system, since 1989, there have been nearly 3,500 people with a combined total of close to 32,000 years. It's quite some time, have spent behind bars after being wrongfully convicted. And so in a country that boasts about being the land of the free, it's scary to think that this social safety net can be more of an entanglement than a place of security.
Wow, those numbers are staggering. Land of the free, indeed. I think we have one of the highest incarceration rates in the world as well. So just thinking about that motto in the context of those facts is pretty crazy. Due process has been the topic of discussion all over the news lately, and that's why we're covering it this month as a social safety net. It wasn't our original plan to, but it became very, very clear that everyone everywhere all at once really need to hone in on this topic, to help educate ourselves and the public on how important this is, something that in the US we often take for granted. Many of the cases that are in the news involve immigration, but the issue is a lot bigger than that. From the federal level, the judicial branch is one of the three co-equal branches of government, the other two being the executive and legislative branches. This system of checks and balances hinges upon one another so that no one branch misuses its authority. This is the core of our democracy. And the judicial branch, in turn, has the authority to decide the constitutionality of federal laws and resolve other cases involving federal laws. This is where having the right to legal representation is crucial because interpreting the various laws can be extremely difficult. And if you're unfamiliar with them, the system can work against you. For example, the right to peacefully and lawfully protest. This right encompasses the ability to verbally express opinions, engage in symbolic actions, and is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. I myself, along with other disability advocates, were up at the Capitol in Connecticut today giving a press conference slash rally slash demonstration on how we feel that certain laws in Connecticut are not delivering disability justice. For wheelchair repairs, insurance not paying for transportation when your wheelchair is broken to go into a shop and get it fixed. The fact that medical facilities and doctors' offices don't have Hoyer lifts or people aren't trained to use them. So literally no one in a power chair can go to their doctor and get put on a table and have a full physical. You're limited to whatever they can reach and examine while you're sitting in your chair. We were able to do that without fear of being arrested. And the problem is, if you eliminate due process, that fair treatment under the law, where you have a right to a lawyer, where you have a right to a court case, and the government doesn't like what you're saying, well, you just skip that whole step. They can put any label they want. They can accuse you of any crime, and you will never have the opportunity to push back against it, to offer a defense, or to explain your case to a objective judge or jury. And there are several instances here in the US today where this has not gone well for peaceful protesters, that have been in the news. And this is not just a right for citizens. This is a right for anyone in the United States, anyone who's on US soil. We've heard about Rumeysa Ozturk, who wrote an op-ed, asking for her college to divest from Israel in protest of the war in Gaza, and writing an op-ed, which was not calling for violence or anything of the kind, led her to be abducted and imprisoned by ICE. We have Mahmoud Khalil, who's a permanent resident, who again was leading a peaceful protests at Columbia, and is still in detention, awaiting deportation. And there are many, many others. Mohsen Madawi, who was about to get his citizenship, and was detained and was recently released. So there's many examples, and while these, as I said, are kind of in the context of immigration or people applying for citizenship or green card holders or on student visas, the trend is not going in the direction you want it to go.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. I remember hearing someone respond to individuals who have been arrested because they've done something that is maybe in contrast to what the government is standing for. Say things like, you're here to get an education, not protest, right? And we know, as you stated earlier, our country has a history of doing that, even from the shut-ins and boycotts and things of the 1950s and 60s. The retaliation by law enforcement agencies was to hose people down, right?
Yeah.
Threats of like bombing churches, because people in the community just could not see things differently than what they've been holding on, and the bit of the privilege, right? And I think that's
And
sorry, go ahead.
and what kind of education are we expecting people to get if that education doesn't involve, the value and responsibility of peaceful protest, of civil disobedience, right? Like if you're reading history and you're studying history, every single moment of progress in our society has come as a direct result of people protesting and speaking out and getting arrested and being able to do so freely. Like, if people aren't supposed to learn that when they come to the US to study, what are we trying to teach them?
Yeah, you know what? It almost it's very hypocritical because you think about some of the individuals who have been arrested. Many of them, um, their country of origin usually already persecutes you know, young women from even being able to have access to education, right? So then you leave your country and to a country that says we embrace those who come legally. We embrace, people who want to contribute to society. And then you turn around and say, well, they're putting out a paper. Well, as you said, there's always been this tug and pull, and unfortunately, you know, everyone doesn't have that megaphone. So the power that we do have really lies in our ability to speak on the issues and have a civil discourse about it and not fear that what I'm saying is somehow going to get me in trouble and it's going to be lopsided within the legal system.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's really scary because what happens, if these fundamental rights, if it becomes norm for, forget justice delayed, justice denied. This is justice denied because you're not even being given access to the judicial process that you should get, that you're not even getting your day in court. It's justice skipped, justice denied. And if this becomes kind of norm and we accept, okay, this is okay for foreign students on visas, okay, this is okay for green card holders, then, it becomes, okay, this is okay for citizens if they've been called terrorist sympathizers.
Mm.
Who makes those decisions? And you could be protesting a war because you're against genocide, and all of a sudden that could land you in the category of being called a terrorist sympathizer. Like, that is not a world we want to live in. So Corey, break it down first. What does the Constitution actually say about due process?
Yeah, no, that's a great and important question. So the due process clause is in the Amendment for the federal government and the 14th Amendment state governments of the U.S. Constitution. And it ensures that no one is deprived of life, liberty, or property without fair legal procedures. So this means the government must follow certain rules and procedures before, taking away someone's freedom or property. This includes people who are undocumented. However, those who have committed certain crimes can obviously put their rights in jeopardy. But with that being said, my question is, what happens when you've experienced due process after having had the opportunity to present your case before a court and if brought to trial, you've been found guilty by a jury and sentenced? Are you still protected by the Constitution? And so the example that I bring up is related to the idea of deporting American citizens. Um, you know, the current administration has said, according to NPR, we have others we're negotiating with too, he said. This is the president. If it's a
Regarding other
homegrown,
other other countries they're negotiating with besides
yeah,
El
other
Salvador.
exactly. Um, but if it's a homegrown criminal, I have no problem. Now we're studying the laws right now. Pam, which is the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, is studying it. If we can do that, it's good. So, I mean, there's really two issues at hand. One, even if you do commit a crime and are convicted, the government's position is essentially let's deport those individuals to other countries, even if they are American citizens. And then the second is the swiftness of these executive orders. So the fear is that someone presumably innocent could be whisked away without going through the court system, regardless of citizenship. I think, you mentioned this before. That is kind of like the crux of the issue, right? Like we pointed to the almost 3,500 people who have been wrongfully convicted, right? Those people are going through these appellate courts. They're trying to get their sentences overturned because they're innocent. And if we just quickly just say, all right, your DNA was at the scene of the crime, it's whatever, it's an open and closed, shut case, send that person to death row or send that person to another country. And these countries, after there was a meeting between the president of the United States and El Salvador, and they're like, "Yeah, we'll take them for a fee." right? Like criminal justice reform is one of the things that, we try to tout in the overcrowding of our jail system because we try to decriminalize certain penalties that just aren't worth sentencing people to, obnoxious sentences. And now here it is that we could possibly be doing the same thing. And, we could talk a little bit too about Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who, yes, he has openly admitted that I've come to this country illegally. However, he has also provided and gone through another protective status that allows him to be here. And so trying to make these almost, it seems like, forced links to justify the actions is scary. And as a citizen who advocates for social change and social reform, I wonder, you know, could I be next? Could I be one of those ones simply because speaking out or doing something that is just not in alignment with what any administration wants to do?
Yeah, I mean, there's also the dehumanizing aspect of this, right?
Mm,
Like if we decide as a people, as a country, as a community, that um, anyone convicted of such and such crime, we're going to kick them out and we're going to send them to another country the same way that uh, we sell our trash to China or we sell our recycling to some other country. If we don't own our own criminals who are homegrown, who come, they're not coming from somewhere else. Like they're coming from our families, they're coming from our
yeah.
neighborhoods. Like we are somewhat responsible for whatever social community factors um, involved, or perhaps contributed to these things. It's a denial of our own potential to to do terrible things. Um, but it is essentially wanting to wish a problem away and say that these people are no longer human. They should no longer be considered part of our society. And of course, people do awful, terrible, terrible things, but they are human beings. They are still human beings and they still have rights as human beings. And as you said, a lot of these wrongful convictions, if we start sending people to other countries where they no longer have, a robust judicial system or an advocacy system, how are people who are wrongfully convicted supposed to find the support and assistance in overturning those convictions if they're no longer on US soil? It'll be
Mm,
impossible. And I'm pretty sure that's part of the point. In
yeah.
in this situation with Abrego Garcia, where he had already had some protected status, you know, uh, there's been no proof of him being part of a MS gang except for some photoshopped MS-13 numbers on a picture of his knuckles.
Yeah.
Um, and the government has admitted that there was a mistake, and the Supreme Court has ordered them to facilitate a return,
Yeah.
and and still, the he's not being returned. I mean, this is an example of what really can happen to any of us, which is why we're kind of focusing on this, and this is such an important issue for all of us to grapple with and understand. Like this could be you, this could be your friend. You're the wrong color. You have the wrong tattoo. You're in the wrong place, the wrong time. You speak the wrong language. You say the wrong thing. You could be targeted. So
Yeah.
the definition sounds straightforward that you mentioned earlier, Corey. But some folks interpret that definition differently. Many believe that the Constitution protects everyone, including people who are undocumented immigrants, while others argue that it doesn't. And according to an interview conducted by NPR, a source from the Migration Policy Institute said the Constitution does not make a distinction between citizens and non citizens for the application or the protections of due process and judicial review. And the ultimate concern, he says, is that if you strip due process for one group, that's a slippery slope for others. And that includes the disabled community. I mean, in a moment such as this, I'm concerned about the rights of all individuals, especially those, for example, with disabilities, um, who may be undocumented and have left their country to receive care here that's unavailable there, and may be deported back to their country of origin and could die as a result. Or I've heard stories of people who've come here undocumented, they're working, they have families, they're contributing, and then they become paralyzed, right?
Mm.
And if they do go home, there's little to nothing for them there. And so their only hope of really surviving is somehow getting a status. And they didn't come here to become disabled. That just happened.
Right.
And, what is our response to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a good point. I know I read an article in USA Today, and it reported that a family in Texas, they were deported because they had made several illegal crossings before. And though the parents aren't citizens, their five children are. And what compounds their situation is that the daughter recently had brain surgery and could not have adequate care in their region of Mexico. And so the choice that they were given was either to allow the child to stay in the care of someone here in the States or stay together. In another case, you have a situation where there's a 2-year-old who is a citizen, but the mother isn't. And now the administration argues, and many people agree with this, that the parents are committing the crimes, not the child. And if they deport one and keep the other, the media will say they're tearing families apart, or they're doing something wrong, and then they'll kind of quote unquote look like the bad guys. So people who find themselves in these situations are left with few options, few rights, and no due process. I think that's the biggest concern because you know you. It's not that you're like if I have come here illegally and I have given birth to a child who is a citizen by birth, and you tell me that you're going to deport me because I came here illegally. Okay, if I don't have any other support here, of course I'm going to go with my child because I'm trying to be the responsible parent. But I also think people go to great lengths in order to protect what they love and hold dearly, right? It's not to say that we justify every action, but when I think about why many people have come to this country, they look towards better opportunities. They look towards trying to get the care that in their country they may not have, right? People travel all across the world. Like when I went into the Kennedy Krieger International Spinal Cord Center in Baltimore, Maryland, it's international for a reason. They have some of the best physical therapists. They have some of the best doctors. They have some of the best equipment that before this, I don't know when I was going to be able to like stand again, but I had the opportunity to go there. So if I can experience that, I can only imagine if I had a child with special needs and I know this is the place I need to go, I would do my best to get there too, because I want my child to live an opportunity to be provided in a fair way.
Mm. No, that's so true, Corey. I mean, this just kind of shows the absurdity. If we just zoom out, this is kind of an idealistic way of looking at the world, but it is a very, I think, basic way, which is we all live on this planet. We're all human beings. Why can't we all get the help we need? Like,
Mm.
why do we get in each other's way? What are we so afraid of? Why are we so afraid of a family of five and, you know, a child who needs brain surgery? Like, why is that a situation that causes fear and that motivates laws like this? Can't we find a way to make immigration more humanitarian, more practical, more, just recognizing that we all have a right to this earth and to this community and to health. And now that's really difficult to achieve for obvious reasons while keeping borders and while there are still countries, et cetera.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be this way. There is no universal law that says that there's no solution to this problem. I mean, in
Mm.
another situation where a 2-year-old U.S. citizen was deported, the mother was not a citizen, the father was, and the mother obviously took the child with her, um, didn't want to be separated from the child, but they gave the parents 1 minute to talk about options. The child had no due process. There was no breathing room to figure out a support. Um, and I believe this was the 2-year-old with Was this the 2-year-old with cancer or no?
No, I
No,
don't
no,
know.
that was someone else.
That was another case though.
Yeah,
But
it was.
the one that you're talking about, I think you're accurate about that.
So I mean, it's just inhumane what is going on, and um, examples that this is currently happening to citizens. The those citizens who have no voice, who cannot talk for themselves,
Mm.
literally, you know, um, this is happening to children. So, needless to say, this is a true humanitarian crisis with no easy fix. Um, although apart from due process, we're not advocating for open borders. This is about the assessment of individuals coming into the US, no matter what point of access is used or what country they're coming from, ensuring that if you're entitled to rights and judicial procedures that allow you to present evidence to support your case, then you should be able to do so.
Period. I mean, I think that's simplifying it in the best way. You know, we speak about a country of laws and, this fear you won't have a country if you just allow these things to happen. America is a huge melting pot. Nobody here except for indigenous people are truly native to the country in the first place, either by force or job opportunity. I mean, think about it. Indentured servants, they came here from all over Europe to start a better life, to be able to fulfill their servitude and then be freed, looking for economic prosperity, right? People venture over to the West and, took out people who were just natively here. So there's just like this, it really is like super hypocritical that we don't first analyze our own creation and where was the justice for those individuals, right? It was super delayed. It was super denied. But then we see, on the other hand, when individuals who are clearly guilty of certain crimes, but they have the advantage of being able to pay lawyers and they can develop resources, will kick the can down the road in order to, appeal, slow down before, a verdict. People intimidate witnesses, a number of things that we've seen in the news recently. Yet you feel it's fair for you, and you're only doing what? Taking advantage of the laws that are here. So we need to like stop trying to strategically break down what the Constitution is clear on and not clear on. But what we do know is that you can't just run in and just take people without presenting the evidence. But it just goes back to the opening part of our discussion. And many of the situations we've spoken about are justice for those who believe we have a failed immigration system that allows bad people into our country and that we don't have a country because of it. And so, we've seen visuals created on the White House lawn recently displaying people who have committed horrific offenses, supporting the reason why we need to have such aggressive actions to get them out. But at the same time, the larger portion of these marginalized groups in particular, they just really want freedom from oppression in their own homelands. So in some respects, justice isn't being delayed at all. It can come quicker for some. However, should you find yourself or someone you know on the side of injustice, you're going to want your day in court.
All this talk on due process, and it just also reminds me something that uh, Trump said when he was running for office the first time. He said, I could shoot someone
Mm.
standing on Fifth Avenue in New York, and his supporters would still love him. And I don't care. This is a nonpartisan discussion. you know,
Yes,
I think everyone is agreement that like constitution, due process is a good idea.
right.
But when the leader of your country says and brags about being able to commit murder and get away with it, to shoot someone and still have the adoration of their followers, that is not going in a good direction. um, and yeah, I mean, I just want to share, something I mentioned in my speech that I gave up at the Capitol today. that I think applies. I was talking about, Connecticut is our home, at least for Corey and me. But we can expand this to the country. We could expand this to the world if you want. If you want to be super idealistic about it, but this is our home. Where we all live, and that makes us neighbors. That makes us family. And we don't need to like or agree with each other, but our laws should not care about that. Our laws should reflect our commitment to take care of each other despite our differences. And if we can't do that, then we're choosing to make this place that we live a land of strangers.
Mm.
And I don't think that's what we want. We want to know our neighbors. We want to be a welcoming country. We want to have a welcoming society that embraces our differences, especially for people with disabilities, right?
Yeah.
And we can't have that if our laws, if we can't implement laws and allow laws to look at situations fairly. And the only way that's possible is if, even for the people committed, or people who have committed, or even for the people who have been accused of the most disgusting, heinous, terrible crimes, if we can't guarantee that they'll get their day in court, we don't have a guarantee that we'll get ours either.
Mm. Well, that was very well said. I think to bring it full circle rather. I believe, in that debate with William Gladstone, um, I think it was over the Irish settlements in the UK, right? And they've had conflict for centuries, um, and over time, um, he left the traditional perspective to a strong commitment to Irish home rule. Um, he opposed the idea of special treatment for Ireland, but his views shifted as he became increasingly interested in something called the Irish question and the plight of the Irish peasantry. And he eventually became a staunch advocate for home rule, believing it was essential to address that question and just their status and where they stand. And I think that the most important thing to know is that our paths cross in so many different ways. Whether you're at the grocery store, the UPS driver, the person working construction at your home, um, the doctor that you are seeing who's your attending physician, come from a variety of backgrounds. And I think that when we're so quick to dismiss anyone, we miss out on the potential that they could have to change, right? Many people who are locked up um, do get reformed behind bars, and they're in those law libraries and they're helping others fight their case legally. It's almost like what we do here in More Than Walking with peer mentorship, right? We're just trying to help guide people to the best way so that they can help change and reform their own lives. And I think when given the opportunity for people who find themselves dealing with the legal system or they're crossing, borders, I think we need to take a collective breath and say, why are people doing this in the first place? And usually it revolves around humanitarian needs that aren't adequate where they're coming from. And we just want to have a system where we say, okay, tell me why. And this is how you go forward from it, whether the resulting ends in being deported or you find yourself getting asylum or some other protected status. I think it's best that we hear each other out so that justice is not denied for anybody, regardless of you being a citizen or not.
Very well said. Very, very well said. Very true.
Thank you. But as always, bro, I love these conversations because it really gets you to think critically outside of your box. And, I hope that people will get a lot out of this discussion and give their honest, unfiltered feedback because, that's what we want to hear.
Yeah. Next week, we're going to talk about all the crimes we've committed and our experience with due process.
Oh yeah,
No,
I'm jaywheeling, not
all our
jaywalking.
runs, all our run-ins with the law. No, and we'll be applying this, to a little more going in depth to how this relates to disability rights advocacy,
Mhm.
um, and really like how how we really wouldn't have a lot of the progress we have if we didn't have the right to protest and have the right to get arrested and I mean have the right to get arrested, have the right to be arrested and have due process, so that we could go back out and keep protesting. Um, but those are really important, really fundamental to any democracy. And Corey, still hope we have it in a week from now. But keep on keep on doing it. Stay tuned in and sign up for the More Than Walking newsletter at morethanwalking.com to learn about the topic we will cover next, which this month is due process and how you can participate, such as next week. Also, or this week if you're listening to it next week. Also, like, comment, and subscribe to our More Than Walking YouTube channel to watch each podcast, and click that notification bell so you are alerted when new episodes drop. Follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for More Than Walking or Super Adaptables.
So yes, until then, remain encouraged, stay hopeful, and above all else,
Keep adapting.